So we have two Mishnayot in Masechet Sukkah which discuss Netilat Lulav b'Shabbat. When is this to be done and when is this not to be done? In order to prevent any misunderstanding, I shall state at the very outset, Lulav, Netilat Lulav is to be done on Shabbat only, according to these Mishnayot, on the first day of Sukkot, not any other day. So this coming Shabbat Hol HaMoed, there's no Netilat Lulav. I want to make that absolutely clear. I won't be surprised if, despite the fact that I've just made this absolutely clear, someone will go ahead and misunderstand and do the opposite on this coming Shabbat. I won't be surprised because I know that these things happen. But I repeat, on Hol HaMoed Shehal Yot b'Shabbat and Netilat Lulav. Netilat Lulav, according to the Mishnah, is shaykh only on the first day, because only on the first day is the Mitzvah min Torah. The Mishnah states, Mem Aleph Amud Beth, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Hag Sukkot Shehal Yot b'Shabbat. What do we do? Kol ha'am molichim et lulav vehen lebet haKnesset. Everyone takes their lulav to the Bet Knesset before Shabbat, because you can't carry it on Shabbat. L'machorat, and the next day, in the morning, on Shabbat morning, mashkimim uva'im, they all come to shul. Kol ehad ve'ehad makir et shelo, and every person recognizes his lulav. They probably made some sign, or they could have tied a little piece of red thread on here, and this guy used blue thread, and he did it at the top, he did it at the bottom. I don't know. Don't ask me how, but they all knew how to recognize their lulav, or how they tied it together, whatever it is. L'machorat mashkimim uva'im kol ehad ve'ehad makir et shelo v'notalo. And every person took his own lulav, and it was din netilat lulav on Shabbat morning. We're talking again about the first day with his own lulav. Why? Mipnei she'amaru hachamim en adam yoseh yedeh hovatho b'yom tov harishon b'lulavo shel havero. It has to be your own on the first day. On other days, it says in the Mishnah, v'shar yemot ha'hag adam yoseh yedeh hovatho b'lulavo shel havero. All right, so what does this Mishnah state? That the Miswah of Netilat Lulav is Doha Shabbat v'Yom Tov b'Yom Harishon. Right? Miswah Lulav, Doha Shabbat. Well, it's not Doha Shabbat in the sense that you can carry it. B'Reshut HaRabim, you can't do that. That's why you bring it to the shul before Shabbat. But the Miswah of Netilat Lulav, the Na'anua b'Halel, is done on Shabbat morning, on the first day only. Okay? This is on Mem Aleph Amud Beth, the end of Perek Shelishi of Sukkah. We have a second Mishnah, which is the very beginning of Perek Revi'i, Mem Beth Amud Beth, one daf later. So it explains, Lulav wa'arava, Shisha wa'shiv'ah. In other words, that these miswath of Lulav and Arava can either be 6 days or 7 days, depending on what? Depending on whether the first day is Shabbat or not. It says in the Mishnah, goes on to say, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Hag, when the first day falls on Shabbat, Shehal Yot b'Shabbat, Lulav Shiv'ah. In that case, you do Netilat Lulav for 7 days, because the first day, even though it's Shabbat, you do it, and you have another 6 days of HaSukkot. The 8th day, of course, being Shemini Aseret, which is not Sukkot, and there's no Mitzvah Lulav. So you have Yom Tov Harishon, and you have another 6 days. That's altogether 7 days. So in that case, that year, when the first day is a Shabbat, you have 7 days of Lulav. If, however, like this year, the first day of the Hag is not on Shabbat, you have 6 days of Lulav, because on the Shabbat, we don't do Netilat Lulav because it's not the first day. Okay, straightforward. Machon. The Gemara says, this is the Talmud Bavli, Daf Mem Beth Amud Beth at the bottom. Amai, why is it a sort to do Netilat Lulav on Shabbat Bichla? Why is it a problem if it's not the first day? Titul Ba'al Mahu. It's, as Rashi says, En Bosad Isur. There's no Isur in holding the Lulav in your hand. And it's not even Muktzeh, because you prepared it beforehand. Machon? So what's the Isur? What's the problem? Well, it has Shabbat. It should therefore be Doha Shabbat. So you should be able to do Netilat Lulav every day of the Chag, even on Shabbat, even when it's not the first day. Amar Rabba, Gezerah Shema Yitalanu Biyado V'yalech Esel Baki Lilmod. ויעבירנו 400 ברשות הרבים. והיינו תעמד השופר, והיינו תעמד המגילה. This is the famous Gezerah of Rabbah. Gezerah de Rabbah, which is not mentioned in the Mishnah or in the Tosefta or in the Yerushalmi, but it's mentioned in the Bavli a number of times, precisely in these contexts, as it says here, to do with Sukkah, Shofar, Megillah, that when these things are on Shabbat, you do not perform the mitzvah on Shabbat. Shema ya'virenu 400 b'reshut harabim. Because it's asur to carry any such thing b'reshut harabim on Shabbat, and therefore it's not done on that day. So it's put off. Megillah is read on Yudaret, not on Tethwal, shall we say. In the case of shofar, shofar is not to be blown on Shabbat anywhere outside the Mikdash. That's another discussion. And in the case of Lulav also, because Shema, someone will go to someone to learn how Ech L'Taltel. Rashi says, lest he go to someone to teach him how to do the na'anua, where you do the na'anua, or how to hold the lulav, or whatever it is, and a person will carry it with B'reshut Rabim. So you don't do it on Shabbat. Okay. The Talmud says, if that's the case, Yom Rishon Nameh. If that's the case, this should also apply to the first day. Shofar's minat Torah, we say we don't do it on Shabbat, or at least according to the Bavli, that's how it's understood. The same as Megillah is an important mitzvah, not minat Torah, but we don't do it on Shabbat. So why would this not apply, this hashash of carrying it, B'reshut Rabim, why does this not apply to Lulav if it falls on the first day? So the Gemara says initially, well, a person can do the Netilat Lulav at home. He doesn't have to carry it. Doesn't have to take it to shul. He can get up in the morning. He can do Netilat Lulav. He can even say Halel at home, whatever. He can do it at home. So eventually the Gemara says, Rishon di'itha minat Torah b'gvulin lo gazru b'ho Rabbanan. The first day, which is minat Torah, even b'gvulin, even outside the Mikdash, outside Yerushalayim, wherever you may be, there is a mitzvah minat Torah to do Netilat Lulav. Lo gazru b'Rabbanan. The Chachamim do not make a gezerah not to do Netilat Lulav on the first day. Hanach, the lethno minat Torah, the other days of the year, which are not minat Torah, b'gvulin, outside the Mikdash, gazru b'ho Rabbanan. There is such, this gezerah exists. If that's the case, as the Talmud Bavli, this should apply today as well. In other words, here we are sitting in Bavel. The first day is a mitzvah b'chol makom, even in Chutz La'aretz. So why? And everyone knows that we're not taking the lulav on the first day. So why don't we do this on the first day? You just said on the first day there's no gzerah not to do it. So we should do it. So the Talmud says, "Anan delayad enan bekibar diyarha." We don't know for a fact which is the correct date. We don't know if today is Tethwal, the first day of Tishrei, Tethwal b'Tishrei, the first day of Sukkot, or perhaps tomorrow, because there was a Sefeka Deyoma, because of the confusion to do with the calendar and the Shomronim, the Kuthim, confusing matters by sending incorrect information and signals, as we learn in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. So that's why they had the institution of 2 days of Yom Tov, according to what it says in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Masechet Vesa. Why we have 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, right? So we don't know whether today is really the day which is Minat Torah or not. As Rashi says, Shema en Yom Tov ad lebahar. Perhaps Yom Tov is really only tomorrow, not today, and therefore misafek we don't do Netilat Lulav misafek on Shabbat. If you know wadai that today is Tethwal b'Tishrei, then you do Netilat Lulav. But when you have a safek misafek, you don't doche Shabbat. You don't doche this gzera. However, in Eretz Yisrael, they know for a fact that today is the first day of Sukkot. They have no such safek, because they're within a relatively short distance from the Beit Din, where the Chodesh was Mekudash, where they did Kiddush HaChodesh and announced it, and therefore all the Jews of Eretz Yisrael know for a fact when Rosh Chodesh was. This information took longer to get to places like Bavel, but in Eretz Yisrael everybody knew. Therefore, they in Eretz Yisrael, they do it on the first day. As the Gemara says, that's true. And the Gemara says that's correct. We accept that, and they bring what as proof of this. What is the proof that this is correct? The Mishnah that we quoted at the beginning, that says that on Yom Tov shehal yod b'Shabbat, Yom Tov Rishon shehal yod b'Shabbat, kol ha'am molichim et lulavehem levet haKnesset. So you see, they're doing Nitlat Lulav on Shabbat morning. They took the Lulav there before, prepared it Erev Shabbat, left it there, and in the morning they came and did Nitlat Lulav in the Beit Knesset during Hallel. So the Gemara here on Daf Mem Gimel now, Amud Aleph says, see, that the Mishnah says, Mufurash, that's what you do. We don't do it because we have a Safek. They don't have a Safek, so they do it. So according to this, what the Talmud here has stated is that the kiyum of the miswa of Lulav on the first day of Sukkot, shehal hayot b'Shabbat, there is such a miswa, but only in Eretz Yisrael where there is no safek regarding the day, regarding the date. But in Chutz La'aretz, when they had such a safek, misafek you never are doche Shabbat misafek. Right, just like with Milah, right? If Milah is Vaday Yom HaShmini, as Zedochet HaShabbat, we do the Milah on Yom Shmini. But if it's Safek Shmini, Safek Teshi'i, we don't know if the child was born Ben Hashem Ashov, it's not clear, shall we say? So then the Brit Milah is done on Sunday. And so according to that, in Eretz Yisrael, what should we be doing on the first day that falls on Shabbat? Not this year, another year, when it falls on Shabbat, we should be doing Nitlat Lulav. But that's not what everybody's doing. Correct? Why not? This is on Daf Mem Gimel, Amud Aleph. You turn the Daf, and you go through the whole sugya that discusses over here, then you get to Daf Mem Dal at the top, and it says, in the bottom of Mem Gimel, and going on to Mem Dal, it says, Kewan da'anan la dahenan, inu nami la dahu, and then it says, wait a second, Yom Tov Rishon, that we don't do it on the first day which falls on Shabbat. But they do it. They do Nitlat Lulav. Rashi says, Shelo la'asot Yisrael agudot unireh kishtei toroth. So here the Bavli on Daf Mem Daled contradicts what the Bavli said on Daf Mem Gimel explicitly. Here it says, and the Mishnah, two Mishnayot, this one here and this one here, say that on the first day which falls to be on Shabbat, yesh netilat lulav. And the Bavli said here on Daf Mem Gimel, that's in Eretz Yisrael, but not in Bavel. But on Daf Mem Dalet it says, seeing that we here in Bavel don't do this on Shabbat, they shouldn't do it either.
Maybe the Mishnah is talking about a time when most Jews lived in Eretz Yisrael, or when it was the center. And then here in the Gemara is talking more now about the period of time in which the Jews in Eretz Yisrael are the miut.
And therefore, okay.
Therefore, they go according to, I guess, the Rov, which is Bavel. They should be more like them.
So you're suggesting that if most Jews are in Chutz La'aretz, then the Jews of Eretz Yisrael should follow the Jews of Chutz La'aretz.
That's what this seems to suggest. The Gemara is suggesting it, not me.
Okay, no, you're right. Lichora, that's what it's suggesting. But you have to ask yourself, why is this? Since where do we find that because one Jew cannot perform a given miswah, he's anus. This Jew is in a situation he can't perform the miswah of sukkah. He lives in Siberia, it's too cold. He can't be in the sukkah, it's freezing cold, it's snowing. Even if to eat there, he'll catch pneumonia. If he sleeps there, vaday, he probably won't make it bichlal. So it's not shayach, he has no miswah of sukkah for this poor Jew in Siberia. And the same is true of many places in the world. In fact, stay here till tonight and you'll see it's quite cool in the Vedania right now in the evenings.
אבל זה מעניין שהם דואגים יותר לספק של שבת לולב מאשר ביום כיפור שלא צמים עליו. כי אם יש ספק לגבי היום של סוכות, יש גם ספק לגבי היום של יום כיפור.
The Gemara discusses
זה לא
this.
דואגים.
All right, but there's sakanat nefashot. To tell people to fast 2 days is sakanat nefashot. So it wasn't done. But it does mention Amora in the Talmud that did fast 2 days, but it's not an exerat you can say for the tzibur. It's dangerous. Anyway, so So where do we see that when one Jew A cannot perform a mitzvah, so you tell Jew B, look, seeing that your friend over there can't do the mitzvah, you shouldn't do it either. Isn't that a bit strange? Because the Jew in Russia cannot perform the mitzvah of Sukkah because of the weather or whatever, so therefore the Jew living in Balmi Eretz Yisrael, Bikat Yarden, he shouldn't keep the mitzvah, or wherever he may be. That doesn't make a lot of sense. That's a very unusual claim, right? There are many situations where one Jew is unable to do the mitzvah, and the other Jew is able to do the mitzvah. Lo omrim le'ehad hato kadei she'yizkeh havercha. זה לא כדי שאתה תפסיד כפי שהוא מפסיד. Doesn't make sense.
But this is a little bit different because it's telling them that they should do something rather than they. It is saying they should abstain from something, which is taking the Lulav, but really what it's saying is that they should do something, which is to keep perhaps the extra day, because obviously they would be suggesting here, therefore, that in Eretz Yisrael you should be keeping 2 days, because otherwise, how would you be keeping the practice that they're doing in Bavel?
Again? Sorry, again.
Their whole thing is that because they have 2 days, like taking the Lulav on the second day, on Yom Rishon, that is like taking it on the first day, essentially. Because for them it's Yom Tov. So they are essentially, therefore, taking it on the first day, just like, almost like it's like this one drawn-out day, perhaps,
right.
Perhaps similar in some sort of conceptual sense to the 2-day Rosh Hashanah. And so therefore, the suggestion that the Jews in Eretz Yisrael should be following what we're doing, because we're in this situation that we have a Safek, and in order so that the Jews don't have different practices, that there shouldn't be a Peleg, Aguda, as Rashi says it, then perhaps what they're really suggesting, therefore, is that the Jews in Eretz Yisrael should be keeping 2 days. And I believe that there's even some Rishonim that made such a suggestion, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, let me tell you what we find here in Meromes Sadeh, which is Hidushim of the Netziv, ala Talmud. He relates to what Rashi says about having a situation where the Jews over there are not doing Lulav on the first day, the Jews here are doing Lulav on the first day. He says, Kedei shelo yeh kishtei toroth. Okay? So the Netziv asks a couple of kushiyot on this. There are other issues where we know there's more than one practice, and we didn't have such a problem of saying this, yesh po shtei toroth. But the real question he asks is as follows. He says, Im ken, bezman shebet hamikdash, nameh hawe kama kilot Yisrael b'chul, v'lo dahu Shabbat, u'veretz Yisrael dahu. In other words, what about the situation, which is the situation that Gemara described on Daf Mem Gimel, that, well, we in Bavel, we won't do it, but those in Chutz La'aretz, they do it. So the Netziv is saying, well, you could say that maybe that was because then there was a mikdash, and perhaps because of the fact that there was a mikdash and there were also many Jews living here, although it's not clear that there were a majority of the Jews in the world at all, not clear, but let's say there were a substantial proportion of the Jews in the world, plus you had the mikdash. So you could say, as in his language, in his Lashon, the Netziv writes, he's actually disagreeing with Rashi. He says, once the Churban has taken place, the Hawiyan Ikar Yishuv Yisrael B'chul. Now the Ikar of Am Yisrael is in Chutz La'aretz. There seems to be a certain assumption on the part of the Netziv, which I think is not historically accurate. In other words, it's not the case that the moment the Churban took place, then there's a huge dispersion of Jews from leaving Eretz Yisrael, exodus of Jews leaving Eretz Yisrael and going into other countries. It didn't happen necessarily in that fashion. It was a long, drawn-out process over centuries that more and more Jews were leaving Eretz Yisrael. It didn't happen overnight. But the Netziv does mention this idea. He says, when in the situation of Galut, and there's no Mikdash, and you have more and more Jews living in Chul, Migraran Yoshevei Eretz Yisrael Ahar Minhal Klal Yisrael V'lo Dahyan Shabbat. This is not how it was before the Churban. Then Haya Ikar Yisrael Beretz Yisrael. What the Netziv seems to be saying is that we do make such a shikul according to the sugya in the second sugya on Daf Mem Daled, which contradicts what it says in Daf Mem Gimel. We do make such a shikul. We do take this fact into account when you have a majority of the Jews in Chutz La'aretz and a small number in Eretz Yisrael. Then there is perhaps an argument to say the Jews, it's not clear that should be so. From the Mishnah it's not clear at all. That in the Tosefta and Yerushalmi it doesn't say such a thing. In the Bavli it says such a thing. And it says such a thing on Daf Mem Daled, contradicting what it said on Daf Mem Gimel. But according to what the Natzif is explaining, it's possible that we make such a shikul, we assess the situation in that way, when you have a clear reality of Galuth and most Jews living in Chutz La'aretz and a minority living in Eretz Yisrael. The Jews of Eretz Yisrael have to follow the majority of Jews in Chutz La'aretz in order not to have a reality of Shtei Toroth. That's or something like that. That's something along those lines. But again, it has to be made clear. Is that the explanation for this statement of the Talmud? Not clear. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says, "Shelo la'asov Yisrael agudot u'nireh k'shtei toroth." But I would like to suggest another possibility, and that is that we have these two statements, Mem Gimel and Mem Daled in Talmud Bavli, and one just contradicts the other. According to Daf Mem Gimel, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael should do Netilat Lulav on the first day, because they have no Sfekat Diyomah. The Jews of Chutz La'aretz should not. And at that point, it didn't seem to bother the Gemara at all, the possibility of Shtei Toroth. Doesn't seem to be an issue. Nachon? Doesn't say, no one says, Rak Shniya, we have Shtei Toroth, it's not right, or something like that. No such question is really asked.
Talking about two different time periods, it would seem.
I would like to suggest that we're talking about this sugya over here, starting here and on to Daf Mem Daled, is a later sugya, a sugya svara'ith, shall we call it, or a sugya stamith. It's not mentioned. There's no statement by any Amora in this sugya. Whereas the earlier sugya on Daf Mem Gimel was describing a period of time when there was still either a situation of some kind of balance between the two Torah centers of Eretz Yisrael and Bavel, or that Eretz Yisrael was still considered the paramount Torah center, because you had the Beth Din, you had the Sanhedrin that was still being Mekadesh the Hodesh Apia Re'iyah, was announcing the new moon to all the Jews in the world. So Eretz Yisrael had this special status. And we know this was the case until roughly the time of Abaye and Rava, that this was the state of affairs in Eretz Yisrael, that in the Jewish world, that Eretz Yisrael had this special status, and they had this Mishpat HaBechorah. They were considered more authoritative and more. They set the tone in many respects. But as the situation changed, the historical realities changed. The calendar became a fixed calendar, and it was no longer, at least according to many authorities. The Rambam doesn't agree with this, but the Ramban and other Rishonim state that the Luah HaKavua does not rely, or is not based, or does not need the intervention or any action on the part of the Beit Din Eretz Yisrael. And the Torah Center and Bavel eventually gained the upper hand. Perhaps there was a desire on the part of the Chachamim in Bavel to not create and not allow a situation where the Jews of Eretz Yisrael were in some way a threat to the supremacy of the Torah Center in Bavel. And this also could perhaps be connected. You might connect it to the question of Rosh Hashanah also, of 1 day, 2 days, because the historical reality with regards to Rosh Hashanah is clear. But they were keeping one day, if you go back 1,000 years, 1,200 years, 1,300 years, and more. But Rav Hai Gaon says that I know that's the case, but they should be keeping 2 days. It's possible this was also the same kind of logic that we see here on Mem Dada, which says, seeing that we're not able to do the Lulav on the first day, well, they shouldn't do it either. In the same way, we're the supreme seat of Torah in the world today, and if we're doing 2 days, they shouldn't be doing 1 day. In other words, there shouldn't be something which casts some doubt on who's in charge, where the center of Torah is. There should be an undisputed and unchallenged supremacy of Torah in one place. It's something along the lines that the Netziv is also suggesting, because the Netziv suggests that as long as there was a mikdash, and then you could say Ikar Yishuv Eretz Yisrael was in Chutz La'aretz, and then they should be able to be independent. But once that is no longer the case, then Eretz Yisrael should follow the lead of Chutz La'aretz. That's basically what the Netziv is saying. However you look at it, the present situation today in Am Yisrael is that at least half of the Jews that are halachically Jewish, the people in the world, not talking about all kinds of fanciful figures that all kinds of Jewish, what do they call themselves in America? Jewish associations or...
Yeah, the Pew Reports.
No, yeah, they have Pew Reports, but you also, what do they call the Jewish organizations? The Jewish federations. They'll have all these figures, and they'll tell you, well, they count the people who attend this Reform temple in Missouri. Okay, well, Missouri is a fine place. I'm quite certain of that. But it's also a fact that 65-70% of the people who attend that Reform temple in Missouri are not Jewish. They're just a fact. They happen to have been intermarried with a Jew, or whatever it is. Their grandfather was Jewish, or whatever it is, but they're not Jewish. Malasot. They want to be Jewish. It's possible, but right now you're not Jewish. And malasot. That's the fact. So they produce all these figures of this. 6 million Jews in the United States. I don't believe that figure for one moment. I think 4 million is probably an optimistic number. So if you look objectively, intelligently at the reality, at the figures, at the statistics, at the demographics, at least 50% of the Jews in the world today are in Eretz Yisrael. This, by the way, I happened to see a similar figure mentioned in an article in the Jerusalem Post just yesterday. This is not news. I mean, this has been known for a long time. There's nothing. No one has exact figures, even in Israel. I mean, how many Halachic Jews are there in Israel? Something like 60%, probably, maybe 65% of the population of the state of Israel as it stands today are actually halachically Jewish, and maybe not even that. Because then you have Arabs, and you have other non-Jews, and you have people from the former Soviet Union who are not Jewish and don't want to be Jewish, but some of them are counted as Jewish nevertheless. So the real figures are something like that. If you look at the true figures, at least 50% of the Jews of the world today reside in Eretz Yisrael. So even this explanation of the Netziv no longer holds water. In other words, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael shouldn't be following the lead of the Jews in Chutz La'aretz. There's no lead to follow. It's the other way around. People from many yeshiva bochas from the United States come to Eretz Yisrael to study Torah. Very few go in the opposite direction nowadays. In earlier times, maybe some generations ago, that happened. That was the case. There were big yeshivot in Lita, etc. There were some people who went from Eretz Yisrael to Volozhin, to Mir, whatever, in Chutz La'aretz, a few generations ago. Today, we know that the traffic is in the other direction. Chaim can confirm this, correct? How many people go from Eretz Yisrael to study in Lakewood? Very few. Quite a few come from Lakewood to study here, shall we say. Lakewood used to be the largest yeshiva in the world in terms of numbers till, I don't know how many years ago, but till X number of years ago.
Oh, the yeshivot moved here? The big yeshivot moved here?
No, you still have Lakewood. You still have 7,000 people studying there every day. But in Mir you have 9, 10,000, 11,000 or something. I don't know. Amazing numbers, right?
So it's more than just numbers. It's the Ikar. Where's the
Ikar? Is also Ikar HaMishkal. Ikar Binyan, what we call in Halachic parlance, Ikar Binyan v'Ikar Minyan. Right? Ikar Minyan u'Vinyan shel HaTorah ba'olam is here. So even this claim or this explanation of what the Talmud statement that if we don't do it, they shouldn't do it either. That's batel. That whole concept, even if it had validity at some point, at least according to the Bavli, was a valid claim or idea. Even though probably the Yerushalmi never accepted such an idea. But today, Vadai is not the case. So, Kal Vachomer, Ben Benoshel Kal Vachomer, for all possible reasons, today in Eretz Yisrael, when Yom Tov Rishon, Haliot b'Shabbat, we should do Netilat Lulav. But not, I stress again, on Chol HaMoed.
Could the fact that there's a Jewish majority in Israel also be an argument for holding more like the Yerushalmi in general as opposed to the Bavli?
That's a different question. It's but it is also, I grant you that it is somehow related. There is a certain, you can see a certain connection. I can see a certain connection. What's the time?
3:30.
3:30?
3:30.
Do we wish to daven mincha?
Can.
Okay, so we'll wrap up in a few minutes. We'll say Birkat Hamazon, B'ezrat Hashem, and we'll daven mincha. So, Aaron, I think you can turn the lights on. There's a red button on that at the bottom. See if that. Turn it on. See what happens. Yeah, very good, excellent. Various arguments have been suggested why the Talmud Bavli takes precedence over the Talmud Yerushalmi. I won't go into all of those discussions and all those various suggestions, but the truth of the matter is that it's not a Torah discussion. It was not for Torah reasons that one Talmud gained precedence over the other. It was for purely historical reasons. In other words, it was Titus and Vespasian and Hadrian, and then the Byzantines, and then Muhammad and his horse thieves, etc., who decided that the Torah, center of Torah in Eretz Yisrael, should dwindle and eventually more or less collapse. The final death blow was the First Crusade in the year Tau Tau. Tau Tau Resh Nuau, in other words 1095-96, the time of the First Crusade. The Jews, there were Jews in Eretz Yisrael, there were quite a number of communities still till that time, but then at that time many were killed and massacred, many fled, so that after that First Crusade there were almost no Jews left in Eretz Yisrael for quite some time. And that was essentially the final blow, that historical blow that resulted in the demise, more or less, of the Torah communities in Eretz Yisrael for quite some time. But it was a long, drawn-out process over many centuries. But it was always for historical reasons. The Arab Caliphate centered in Baghdad, which was a city that was invented. It was built specially to be the capital of this new Arab empire, which just happened to be right next door to the yeshiva of Surah. Surah was an outer suburb of Baghdad. It was in the interests of the caliphate that the center of the Jewish world be right next to their capital, because they understood that these Jews are tremendous merchants. They can communicate with their brethren in France and Germany and in Afghanistan and all kinds of places, and they can arrange this tremendous network of commerce, which will be wonderful for us. You get to tax it, and you're in control, and there's customs and what have you. So they were very interested in the center of the Jewish world being under their thumb, and that they should be in charge of who would run the yeshivot and who, etc. They knew how to also pick the right people who wouldn't cause trouble and would serve their purposes. That's how the real world works. It's not as some people imagine. That's these kinds of realities bring about sometimes also Torah realities, Halachic realities. So the Torah center in Bavel was on the rise, and that in Eretz Yisrael was on the decline. Those are the realities. So today the situation has been reversed, yes, but such processes take many years, generations, sometimes even centuries to play out.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.